Have you ever given your heart to someone only to realize later that it was never love? It was a transaction? You thought you had found companionship, a second chance at love, someone who saw you for who you truly were. But over time, the warmth faded, and the truth became harder to ignore. His sweet words never turned into real action. His affection only lasted as long as he needed something. And worst of all, the moment you stopped giving, he had no reason to stay. For many older adults re-entering the dating world, love can feel like a second shot at happiness. But that hope can also make it easy to overlook red flags, especially when someone knows exactly how to keep you hooked. Today, we're going to uncover the truth. 6 unmistakable signs that he was using you, even though you couldn't see it at the time. If you've ever felt taken for granted, wondering if what you had was real or just a convenient arrangement, stay with me until the end, because these insights might just open your eyes. 1. He never truly listened to you. Margaret hadn't expected to fall in love again at 56. After a long and emotionally draining marriage, she had made peace with the idea of living alone. That was until she met David, a confident, charming man who made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. He listened, or at least that's what she thought. From their very first conversation, he hung on to her every word, asking questions about her childhood, her favorite books, even the dreams she'd once had but never pursued. For the first time in a long time, she felt important, as though someone truly cared about what made her, her. But slowly, something didn't feel right. One evening, she told him about her father, how he used to take her to the lake at sunrise to collect shells, how he would tell her that each one had its own little story. David smiled, nodded, and replied, "That's beautiful." Then, a second later, he launched into a story about his own childhood, without ever acknowledging what she had shared. Margaret brushed it off. Maybe he just got carried away. Then it kept happening. She told him she had always dreamed of visiting Greece, how she longed to walk the streets of Santorini, to see the ruins of Athens. A month later, she mentioned it again, and David furrowed his brow. "You want to go to Greece? Since when?" It hit her like a brick. Over and over, he forgot the things that mattered to her. The book she had told him was her favorite. He had no idea. The struggles she had opened up about? He never brought them up again. The passions that made her feel alive? He never seemed to remember. But when it came to himself, his work, his problems, his interests, he expected her to remember every detail. And she did. For months, Margaret convinced herself it was normal. After all, wasn't it common for people to forget small things? But then, late one night, she had a thought that changed everything. If he cared, he would remember. But he doesn't, because he never truly listened. Love isn't about speaking. It's about hearing. It's about valuing what matters to the other person, remembering the little details not because you have to, but because you want to. If a man listens only when it's convenient, if he forgets your words but never his own, then he doesn't love you. He loves the sound of himself. 2. He only showed up when he needed something. At first, David made Margaret feel special, in a way she hadn't in years. He was always reaching out, calling her every morning, sending sweet texts throughout the day, and making sure to check in before bed. She felt cherished, adored, as though she had finally found someone who truly valued her presence. But then, a pattern began to form. Every time David was at his most affectionate, there was always a request coming. "Hey, beautiful, hope you're having a great day," he'd say, and Margaret's heart would flutter. Then, moments later, "By the way, do you think you could help me out with something?" It started small. Could she pick up a package for him? Could she run an errand since she was already out? And then it escalated. "I hate to ask, but I'm in a bit of a tight spot financially. My paycheck is delayed just until next week." Margaret hesitated, but relationships were about support, weren't they? So she helped. But the more she gave, the more she noticed. Whenever he needed something, he was attentive, charming, and affectionate. But when she needed something, comfort after a hard day, a listening ear, a simple moment of care, he was suddenly distant. One night, after an exhausting day at work, she texted him, hoping for a little support. Hours passed. No response. She went to bed feeling alone. The next morning, still nothing. Then around noon, her phone lit up. "Hey, babe, thinking about you? Hope you're having a great day." Her heart softened. Maybe she had been overthinking. Then came the second message. "By the way, do you think you could help me out with something?" And that was when it hit her. David wasn't in love with her. He was in love with what she could give him. She was his safety net, his support system, his emotional and financial backup. And the moment she stopped giving, he had no reason to stay. A man who truly loves you will be there even when he doesn't need anything. Love isn't about taking. It's about giving and receiving. If his affection disappears the moment his needs are met, if you're always the one offering and never the one receiving, then it's not love. It's convenience. And you deserve better. 3. He kept you hidden. For months, Margaret believed she and David were building something real. They spent time together, shared meals, talked late into the night. He told her how much she meant to him, how special she was, how he had never met anyone quite like her. And yet, there was one thing that nagged at her. A question that always seemed to be met with an excuse. "When do I get to meet your friends?" "Oh, soon. We should all go out sometime." But sometime never came. The weeks turned into months, and though Margaret had welcomed David into her life, introduced him to her closest friends, even spoken about him to her family, he never did the same. She started to notice that their dates always happened in quiet places, places where no one seemed to know him. When she asked about attending a work event with him, he brushed it off. "It's just not the kind of thing for a +1, he'd say, with a quick kiss to distract her. Then one evening, everything became clear. Margaret was out running errands when she decided to stop by a restaurant for dinner. As she walked past a cozy little spot, her eyes landed on a familiar face. David. He was sitting at a table, laughing with a group of people. And beside him, a woman leaned in close, resting a hand on his arm as if they had known each other forever. Margaret's heart pounded. She could have walked in, could have confronted him right then and there. But she didn't. She turned away, the truth settling like a heavy weight in her chest. Later that night, she decided to ask without revealing what she had seen. "Who were you with earlier?" David's expression barely flickered. "Oh, just some old friends. Nothing important." Margaret hesitated. "I'd love to meet them sometime." His jaw tightened. Why does that even matter? Does meeting my friends somehow prove my feelings for you? And just like that, he made her feel like the unreasonable one. But lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Margaret knew the truth. David wasn't keeping his personal life separate. He was keeping her separate. A man who truly loves you wants to share his world with you. He won't make excuses, won't keep you hidden, won't act as though you're just an afterthought. If he avoids introducing you to his family, his friends, his colleagues, it's because he doesn't see you as a permanent part of his life. And if a man is keeping you a secret, you have to ask yourself why, because deep down, you already know the answer. 4. He twisted everything to make you feel guilty. At first, Margaret thought David was just sensitive, maybe a little stressed from work, maybe dealing with things he didn't like to talk about. She prided herself on being understanding. After all, relationships required patience and compassion. But over time, she started to notice something disturbing. Every time she voiced a concern, every time she expressed even the slightest dissatisfaction, the conversation never ended with a resolution. It always ended with her apologizing. It started with the small things. One evening they had planned a nice dinner together. Margaret had been looking forward to it all week. But an hour before, David canceled. "Something came up," he said vaguely. Disappointed, she told him, "I was really looking forward to tonight." David let out an exaggerated sigh. "Wow, I can't believe you'd say that. Do you have any idea how much stress I'm under right now? I was hoping you'd be the one person who understood." Margaret immediately felt guilty. "I do understand," she said quickly. "I just miss spending time with you." David shook his head. "I don't need pressure, Margaret. I need support." And just like that, she was the one apologizing. But it didn't stop there. There were times when Margaret felt like he was pulling away, like his once constant affection was becoming distant. When she finally worked up the courage to ask, "Is something wrong?" "You seem a little distant lately," David scoffed. "So now I have to explain myself every second of the day? Why can't you just trust me?" Again, she found herself apologizing. Then one evening, Margaret had a particularly rough day at work. She just needed someone to talk to, someone to reassure her. When she called David, he picked up with an irritated tone. "What's wrong?" She hesitated. "I just had a tough day. I needed to talk." David sighed heavily. "Look, I can't deal with this right now. You're always so emotional." Margaret froze. Always so emotional. She had spent months walking on eggshells, making sure she never said the wrong thing, never asked too much, never became the kind of woman who was needy or demanding. But the moment she needed something, the moment she sought comfort, she was suddenly too much to handle. That night, lying in bed, she had a realization. David never actually listened to her feelings. He only made sure his feelings always came first. A man who truly loves you will never make you feel guilty for having emotions. He won't twist your words to make himself look like the victim. If every time you express a concern, you end up apologizing, you're not in a loving relationship. You're in a manipulative cycle. A healthy partner listens. A healthy partner communicates. A healthy partner validates your feelings. And if he always turns things around to make you feel bad, it's time to ask yourself, are you in a relationship, or are you being controlled? 5. He made promises but never followed through. Margaret used to believe in words. After all, words were what made her fall for David in the first place. He was the kind of man who knew exactly what to say, the kind who could make the future sound like an exciting adventure just waiting for them to embark on together. "We should go to Italy one day," he told her one evening over dinner. "I've always wanted to explore Europe with someone special." Margaret's heart soared. She had dreamed of visiting Italy for years, walking through the ancient streets of Rome, sipping coffee in a quiet Venetian cafe. The next day she started looking at flights, even found a great deal. Excited, she showed it to David. His smile was forced. "Oh yeah, that would be amazing. But maybe we should wait until things settle down a bit." At first, she understood. Life was unpredictable. Timing wasn't always perfect. But then, it kept happening. David promised to take her on a weekend getaway. He canceled at the last minute. David promised to fix the leaky faucet in her kitchen. He never showed up. David promised to introduce her to his sister. He always had an excuse, and every time she brought up his promises, he had a response ready. "I really want to, babe, but things are just crazy right now. Trust me, we'll do it soon. I didn't forget. I've just been overwhelmed." One night, they were sitting on the couch when he sighed dramatically. "I hate that we haven't been able to do all the things we planned, but once work calms down, I swear I'm going to make it up to you." And just like that, Margaret felt hopeful again. But weeks passed, then months, and nothing ever changed. Then one evening, while sitting alone at her kitchen table, she started thinking about all the promises David had made. And suddenly, the painful realization hit her like a wave. He never actually intended to keep them. He said the right things in the moment to keep her happy, to keep her waiting. Because as long as she was waiting, she wouldn't leave. And that was the truth she had been avoiding. A man who truly loves you doesn't just talk about the future, he builds it with you. If he keeps making promises but never follows through, pay attention to his actions, not his words. Because a man who constantly postpones his commitments isn't busy, he just doesn't prioritize you. And love should never feel like waiting for something that will never happen. 6. He loved what you did for him, not who you were. Margaret had always been a giver. She found joy in making life easier for the people she loved. Whether that meant offering a listening ear, cooking a meal, or simply being the person they could count on. For years she had done this in her marriage, and when she met David, she naturally fell into the same pattern. At first it felt good. David often told her, "You're amazing. No one has ever been there for me like you have." He made her feel special, as if her kindness and support were deeply valued. "You're such a blessing in my life. I don't know what I'd do without you." But over time, Margaret began to wonder, did he love her? Or did he just love what she did for him? It started with the small things. When David was sick, she was the one who brought him soup, checked in on him, and made sure he had everything he needed. But when she was sick, he barely noticed. When he had a stressful day at work, she listened for hours, offering words of encouragement. But when she needed comfort, he dismissed her problems with a casual, "You're strong, you'll figure it out." When he needed help, whether it was fixing something, running an errand, or even financial support, she was always there. But the one time she asked him to pick up something from the store because she had a headache, he sighed. "I've had a long day. Can't you just take something at home?" And then, the question that changed everything. One evening, a friend asked her, "What would happen if you stopped giving? If you stopped supporting him, stopped making his life easier? Would he still be there?" Margaret had never thought about it that way before. That night, she tested it. She didn't text first. She didn't check in on him. She didn't offer to help when he hinted at his problems. Days passed, and David barely noticed. Then, finally, he called her, but not to ask how she was doing. "I've had the worst week," he groaned. "Everything is going wrong. Can we meet up? I just need someone to talk to." And in that moment, Margaret saw the truth. David wasn't with her because he loved her. He was with her because she made his life easier. He loved her effort, her availability, her support, but not her. A man who truly loves you loves who you are, not just what you provide. Love should be a partnership, not a one-sided effort. If he only appreciates you when you're doing things for him but disappears when you need something in return, you're not in a relationship. You're in a transactional arrangement, and you deserve better. You deserve more. Margaret spent months convincing herself that David cared, that if she just tried harder, gave more, or was more patient, things would change. But love should never feel like a test you have to keep passing. Real love isn't about giving endlessly while receiving nothing in return. It's not about waiting for someone to finally treat you right. True love is about reciprocity, about two people choosing each other every single day, not just when it's convenient for one of them. If you find yourself always giving while he only takes, then it's time to ask the hard question: is this love? Or are you just being used? If you've ever experienced this, share your story. Your words might help someone else see the truth before it's too late. And remember, love isn't supposed to feel like a guessing game. When it's real, you'll know.